Hi, my name is Adotei Akwei, and I'm the Deputy Director for Amnesty International USA. And I'd like to welcome you to this incredible panel linked to the documentary Francesco, but also an opportunity to have a discussion about humanitarian crises in different parts of the world. We have a wonderful panel today, and I'm going to take a few minutes now to introduce them. First, we have Suzanne Meriden, who is the Executive Director of the Syrian American Council. In her role, Suzanne advocates to the US government to drive US-Syria policy and support for those on the ground in Syria, as well as works with members of the international community. Suzanne maintains near constant communication with Syrians inside Syria to bring their stories to the United States and international government representatives, as well as the general public. Prior to her work at the Syrian American Council, Suzanne held multiple corporate operation management positions with reputable US retail companies. But after the start of the Syrian revolution, she left that career to work on the Syrian cause. She holds a bachelor's degree in international business from California State University. Next, we have Simon Billenness. Simon is on the board of directors of the US Campaign for Burma and the Committee on Socially Responsible Investment of the Unitarian Universalist Association. He's also on the advisory board member of both Some of Us and the Harry Potter Alliance, and is a co-chair of the Business and Human Rights Group of Amnesty International USA. Simon pioneered the use of shareholder pressure on oil, gas, and mining companies operating in countries like Burma, China, East Timor, and Nigeria. He worked with Greenpeace and US PERG to file the first shareholder resolutions at BP on climate change. With the Free Burma movement, he leveraged state and local Burma selective purchasing and investment laws to pressure corporations, such as the Massachusetts Burma law that was later defended successfully from a challenge at the World Trade Organization and in the US Supreme Court. At Oxfam America, Simon worked with communities around the world affected by mining companies and created a coalition of social investors that successfully pressed Procter & Gamble to start offering fair trade certified coffee through its Millstone band. Finally, we have Evgeny Afineevsky. He's an Israeli-American film director, producer, and cinematographer who lives in the United States. In 2016, Evgeny was nominated for an Academy Award and Emmys for his documentary, Winter on Fire. His most recent film, entitled Francesco, is a powerful documentary about the life and papacy of Pope Francis, and of course, is why we are here today. There are over 75 million people who have been forcibly displaced at the beginning of 2020. This includes refugees and internally displaced persons. That is 1% of the entire population of the world. It would be the 20th largest country by population of the 200 or so countries that exist at the moment, and this number is expected to keep on growing. When the United Nations was founded after the Second World War, one of the commitments that was taken by the member states was the 1951 United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees. It created a system for providing protection to people at risk of persecution in their own countries. 145 countries signed that document, and several institutions have been created over the years to do the work of providing protection and support, such as the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. But as we all know, we're not doing enough. We've all seen the images of asylum seekers being turned away at borders or perishing on the journey that they hoped would lead to safety. News reports carry stories of asylum seekers being deported back to their countries of origin or to other countries that they have no knowledge of or connection with. We seem to have lost the political will to act or the compassion that led the post-World War to make and protect refugees around the world a global commitment. Today, our panel of experts will talk about some of those crises, discuss the situations there, and also discuss the efforts of one global leader, Pope Francis, to refocus the global spotlight on these crises and build pressure on political leaders to take on those crises. We'll start first with the filmmaker, Evgeny. Evgeny, you addressed several crises in your documentary, including the plight of Syrian and Rohingya refugees. What effect do you think the Pope's personal diplomacy has had on the refugee crisis, and how big a role should the Catholic Church play?
First of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for all of you taking your precious time and being with us. I think Pope Francis, he trying to build the bridges. He trying to build the bridges between different countries, different nations. And for him, the diplomacy that he using these days, sometimes we can see and hear about this diplomacy. Sometimes this diplomacy is happening behind the closed doors. But he trying to save precious lives of people who are happening to be in between different war conflicts, either in Burma, where we've seen persecution of innocent lives, and he trying to embrace Bangladesh for allowing people to be sheltered, or like with Syria, he recently pointed for 10 years of this bloodshed that happening in Syria. I think his ability to bring a spotlight to these events in front of the entire world, it's one of the tools that he's using to bring humanity and pay attention to that. And I think it's really important. And being on a journey with him for the last 3 years, and being on a journey with Syria before, on my own journey, witnessing things, witnessing atrocities, trying to bring spotlight, I learned that we as filmmakers, we can bring spotlight to the most important elements that are happening in different corners of the world. And we can not only bring attention, but we also can call for action. And I think that's really important for me as a filmmaker. And that's what I'm trying to do in my movie, like Francesco, or my previous movie, Crisis from Syria. And I think what Pope Francis is doing, he's trying to use media that is surrounding him these days and bring them to this corner, to these important tragedies that are happening in this world, and trying not only to bring attention on this and highlight these tragedies, but he also trying to help these people. When I was talking to the Rohingya refugees in the camps of Bangladesh, they all pointed that after 8 months of the meeting with him, their life started to be changed. A lot of humanitarian organizations started to pay attention to them and try to help them. In terms of Syria, I know that he did a numerous attempts, from sending a letter to President Assad, to sending his envoys like Cardinal Turkson, to doing all kind of diplomacy, but still, it's an ongoing process.
Thank you very much, Evgeny. I'm now going to turn to Suzanne. March marked the 10th anniversary of the Syrian conflict. Because of this, there is far less press coverage. Can you tell us what is happening on the ground and in the country and the current refugee situation?
Thank you so much for having us with all of you here today. We absolutely always appreciate the opportunity to speak about Syria, especially because the Syrian revolution did indeed start 10 years ago and is still ongoing. And the people of Syria, even last week, were still in the streets asking for freedom, just as they did come out into the streets 10 years ago asking for freedom from the oppression from the Assad regime. And Evgeny, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about Syria today, just as we did several years ago when you put out your film, Cries for Syria, one of the best films telling the Syrian revolution story and how it all started. And unfortunately, it is very true that in the media today, it is called a civil war, it is called a conflict, and really it is a revolution that is going to keep ongoing until people get their freedom. You know, one of the things I think that we all need to truly put to the test is to challenge our officials and everyone talking about Syria to speak the whole truth. And in the film Francesco, which is a wonderful film, I'll be honest, I don't cry often. And I cried in the first scene only because I think I knew what I was expecting from your work, Evgeny. And in the middle of the film, the Pope says something like, small gestures, that's what the people want. And it's very true. And when the Pope goes out and speaks, it is very healing. And when he tweeted last week about the 10th year of what is happening in Syria, that was healing. But I actually replied to that tweet and I said, we need people like you, Pope Francis, to go the extra point and to talk about who's inflicting these wars and these attacks, that it's the Assad regime that's causing the suffering. We tend to look at diplomacy in such a way to open those bridges you spoke about, Evgeny, which are so important, which the Pope is doing. But now it is time to challenge these leaders, whether it's religious leaders or officials, or my own US government here in the US, that we must always look to the perpetrator, speak about the perpetrator, and do something about it. So currently, although the US, of course, acknowledges openly that the Assad regime, along with Russia and Iran, are the oppressors and they're attacking the Syrian people and causing all of this fleeing and causing the numbers of the refugees to rise, which is still happening today, by the way. We're not hearing about it in the media, but the bombardment continues. Just last week, Russia and the regime attacked a hospital in the Adotei city, and casualties are still, we're still seeing casualties. People are having to flee. The regime is still threatening the Idlib area now, which holds about 3 to 4 million Syrians. And if they continue, we will see more refugees. So it's time to really look at the root causes and address the root causes. Otherwise, if we keep focusing on taking care of the refugees, as we all are responsible for that, we will never stop the problem. We will continue seeing it and continue having to address an ongoing issue. So going to the root of the cause is the most important part, and having these officials tell the full truth and keeping the media, challenging the media to constantly tell the truth is what we need to be doing now in order to make sure the story is told correctly and to address it.
And Suzanne, you've identified a number of different things, like as getting to the root causes and getting it back into the media's eye. What specifically is the Syrian American Council asking the US government to do, and what can the public do?
Sure, thank you so much. So first and foremost, actually, we started a campaign a couple of weeks ago. That's a very simple campaign at POTUS, #Speak to Syrians, because what is happening right now since the Biden administration took over, they have been quiet about Syria in terms of where the policy is going, in terms of US policy. But we know there are activities. We know today's Secretary of State Blinken did a virtual event with the United Nations addressing the attacks last week, etc. There is movement, but we're not seeing the quick and needed movement, as if Syria is not a priority, when, because of everything I shared earlier, thanks to your question, there is, everything is still the same as it was 10 years ago. And so it does need to be priority. We do need to take care of it. And so through the simple campaign, actually, we were able to generate interest from celebrities and journalists and philanthropists to co-write a letter together and sign it and address it to Biden, which we've handed last Friday, just saying, get Syrians working on the Syria issue on the table, and let us talk and review, and let's look at the policy together, because we need the voice of Syrians on the ground, those who are being attacked by the regime, to be able to share what they're seeing, what they feel needs to happen. And so that's the biggest thing we're asking right now. Of course, the US, along with the United Nations, etc., there's Resolution 2254, which lays out exactly what kind of political transition is needed, what needs to happen to ensure, first and foremost, the stopping of the killing of innocent civilians, and then two, to make sure Syrians can arrive to living in a free state, just like we all get to live. And so right now, the simplest thing is really to talk to our representatives and to ask them to pay attention to Syria and to speak to organizations like us to really understand what is happening so that we can correct what the media is not showing.
Suzanne, we know that the Pope has played a role, a very powerful role that's documented in Evgeny's documentary in addressing the situation and the plight of the Syrian refugees. Have you seen similar support and engagement by other faith leaders in this crisis?
There's been a lot of attempts, but nothing as major as the Pope's attempt, I can say. And certainly, and this is a question that always comes up, even from international leaders, from Arab leaders, this should be such a forefront issue. that we have not seen any major impact. And that's why, in my most humble ways, I call on the Pope to please, take his addressing of the issue even further, to make this a big story, to ensure that, I guess, not making it a big story, but connecting it to actually finding a solution. Talking about it and addressing it and bringing it up consistently is wonderful, but there has to be an action step. And who better than the Pope to bring leaders together to find a resolution to something as simple as stopping the killing of innocent people? And I repeat some of the same comments sometimes, because it really is as simple as that. Sometimes diplomatic matters and bureaucracies cause such, states of closures and just not allowing for things to open up and happen. But gosh, these bridges that the Pope is building have to lead to something. And so there are lots of initiatives. They never go as far as to where they need to be, because they probably get crushed by media or by political agendas. And so we need to take that next step.
Thank you, Suzanne. Evgeny, when you made this film, obviously you not only wanted to tell his story, but you also wanted to show the Pope's work in this kind of peace building or conflict awareness raising. Have you seen other interfaith leaders doing these kinds of initiatives in regarding Syria or any other places?
I think you do have people like Patriarch Bartolomeo, who is also involved in the plight of refugees and also Syrian refugees, because he is in Istanbul and he is trying also to advocate for the Middle East. There is another faith leaders, like, again, not specifically maybe addressing Syria, but addressing the interfaith dialogue, like Dalai Lama himself or other people who trying to advocate for peace and not for the war. So there is the whole coexistence initiative. And I will tell you something, the day before our premiere in Rome in 2020, day before, on the 20th of October 2020, I witnessed how all leaders came to Rome in the middle of pandemic to pray for peace between all countries. And it was interfaith meeting between all the leaders of different faiths. And I think that's what Pope Francis is trying to do. I will never forget the moment, and I'm taking step kind of from Syria and from Myanmar right now, from Rohingyas that we are talking today. But when I witnessed, when in front of opposition leaders of Sudan, he went on his knees and begged them to stop bloodshed of innocent people. He literally was begging them for peace, to stop all this war that they having right now in their homeland. And he was begging them to do it on his knees. And that was incredibly difficult to watch, how 83 years old, it was April 2019, how Pope Francis went and kissed their feet, asking them, begging them to stop this. So his person will do anything to protect and prevent these conflicts and protect innocent lives. So I witnessed a lot of actions that he doing. I witnessed like other people who supporting him doing this. And I think that's important. I want to go back also to the movie, Suzanne, when he bringing by his action innocent lives from Lesbos into Rome and helping them to find their new home. And he's saying each leader, he addressing this specifically in this segment, each leader, depending on the size of the country, can contribute same way. Somebody can contribute little bit and bring little, somebody can contribute and bring more refugees and help them. But it's also important not only to bring these people, it's important to integrate them into society, that they become a part of the society. Because one of the things that I learned on my journey around the refugees, around the migrants, and I'm migrant to United States. I immigrated in my life twice. I immigrated from Russia to Israel, and I immigrated to United States. One of the issues that people usually fearing the migrants, it's, oh, they're coming and they will be living on our taxpayers' money. No, it's our obligation to integrate them. And I remember when I was at Sundance and we opened Cries from Syria, and I had a panel, a lot of people in Salt Lake were talking to me that, yes, we need to integrate them into society. And that's the opportunity that we need to give these people, because they are amazing people. I spend a lot of time with the Syrians, and same like I spend a lot of times with the Rakhine people from the Rakhine state in Bangladesh, in the Cox's Bazar, in the refugee camp. So again, they're amazing, educated people. And if we will allow them to be integrated in this society, we will have a really great addition to culture, to education, to the science in our own homes. And I think that's what Pope Francis is trying to initiate between not only interfaith leaders, but also between leaders of the world. And I think that's by his example, by his gestures, by bringing these people and by helping them to be integrated. And I witnessed how Sant'Egidio community, and I'm taking my hat in front of them, they're doing amazing work during these corridors, bringing people over and over from different camps, from different parts of the world into Italy and integrating them. Sant'Egidio community doing amazing work on the grounds of Lesbos and Lampedusa and in Africa and in Myanmar, in Bangladesh. They're doing a really great job. What I witnessed, it's Caritas and Sant'Egidio. They're cooperating and they're also on their own doing a lot of work. So it's beautiful to see how these organizations under Pope Francis and with other humanitarian organizations trying to help people and also trying to later on integrate them into society. And yes, the leadership of different confessions, like I said, Patriarch Bartolomeo, Dalai Lama, and others, they trying to help all these initiatives. Maybe we're not seeing them on the same kind of level like Pope Francis doing this, because all world's kind of looking at him as the world leader these days. And I'm proud to be able to tell these stories through lens of my camera. So, but still, a lot of leaders are trying to align themselves with Pope Francis.
Thank you very much, Evgeny. I'm going to turn to Simon now. Simon, the Rohingya are now considered the most stateless people in the world. What are the current numbers of refugees and internally displaced peoples of the Rohingya?
Yeah, I mean, the Rohingya are definitely among the largest stateless people in the world. They have no citizenship anywhere in the world. Myanmar has revoked their citizenship and revoked their rights. Rohingya refugees is over 1 million in Bangladesh right now. And again, they're not citizens of Bangladesh. They're never going to be on a road to citizenship in Bangladesh. And so we're talking about a population that has no home anywhere in the world. And at this point, there are now more Rohingya in Bangladesh and elsewhere in the world than there are in Myanmar itself. You know, it's one of the clearest cases of not just ethnic cleansing, but also genocide that we've seen in the world today.
Thank you, Simon. The Pope went to Myanmar to address the government. His visit received both criticism and praise. Criticism because His Holiness did not say the name Rohingya during his official meetings with government officials, including Aung San Suu Kyi, and praise because right after, he went to a refugee camp in Bangladesh to meet with refugees and hear their stories. Can you tell us about this visit and why it was met with both criticism and praise?
Well, I don't blame Pope Francis for not saying the word Rohingya when he was in Myanmar. When he was in Myanmar, his first consideration was to the Catholics inside Myanmar. And let's understand that Christians are a small minority inside Burma, and Catholics are a minority within that minority. And so I don't blame Pope Francis for being very careful and safeguarding the Catholics inside Myanmar. What I'd like to focus on is afterwards, when Pope Francis went to the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh, apologized to the Rohingya directly, and talked with the Rohingya about what he could do to help them. And his his presence, as Evgeny pointed out, shone a spotlight on the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and that greatly helped them. So I would like to focus on that, because that is where, Pope Francis, provided some of the best solidarity and some of the best support that the Rohingya refugees have received.
And your organization has a campaign initiative called No Business with Genocide. Can you tell us about that campaign and how the public can support it?
Certainly. I mean, the whole premise of No Business with Genocide is that governments around the world need foreign investment and need foreign trade. And we can put pressure on our companies not to do business with governments that engage in genocide or crimes against humanity. We can put our consumer pressure, our shareholder pressure, our media pressure, particularly our social media pressure, on companies so that they're not complicit in genocide and they're not supporting governments that are engaging in genocide. And so if you go to our No Business with Genocide Facebook group, you will see actions that you can take, not only to get your governments to put economic sanctions on governments that are committing genocide, like the Myanmar government, but also to put employ our own citizen sanctions, employ our own consumer pressure, shareholder pressure, media pressure on companies directly. And we've already gotten a number of companies, like the Japanese beer giant Kirin, the luxury jeweler Harry Winston, to end their business relationships with the Myanmar military. And people can, again, just go to our Facebook page, go to the International Campaign for the Rohingya website, and you'll find all kinds of actions that you can take to end corporate complicity in genocide.
Thank you, Simon. Evgeny, your film Winter on Fire has been embraced by pro-democracy activists in numerous countries, including Venezuela and Hong Kong. And your film, Cries from Syria, has been used in both efforts to pass legislation and to help raise funds for humanitarian efforts. What is your hope for Francesco?
I will tell you, I do feel that all my movies been a storytelling of call for action. I think what I learned through this storytelling, that it can be advocacy, it can be activism, and at the same time, it can be an action. So I do believe that by bringing these storytelling tools through the lens of the camera, by bringing these important stories, I can open in front of the audience who in last year have been locked in their apartments, in their caves, and were only paying attention to what's happening with pandemic in their own city, in their own street, in their own country. I can open their eyes wide enough to see that we do have a lot of disasters. We, as humans, created. We, the human beings, created all these disasters, from refugee crisis to climate disasters. And for me, climate disaster, it's like a climate genocide that we as humans created, and many others. And I do believe that by pointing to the people, opening their eyes in front of these things and showing them that we still have ability to change. We still have ability to open our hearts, to open our minds and care about these human beings who are suffering, who need our help. I think not all 100%, but still population can change their hearts and minds. Something like Winter on Fire created. Winter on Fire created movements. Cries from Syria created movements. And I believe that Francesco can create a true healthy movement in front of the world today. I do believe that we can change hearts and minds. I do believe in that. I do believe still in humanity. I do believe that we able to spread love. I do believe that we can able to bring peace to the places where still the war. So I do hope and I do believe that through the great message of Pope Francis, we able to bring the change to this world, specifically in these days of pandemic, where we truly need to reevaluate all what we did before, all the disasters that we created, to leave a lot of horrible actions behind us. And with fresh mind, with open hands and open arms, to go into the future and create much more safe environments, much more peaceful places for the kids and for, again, for all of us. I believe that Pope Francis, in my vision, he's like a father who collecting all of us, kids from all over the world, from all over the corners, and trying to express his love to all of us, saying, we're all one big family. We need love. We need peace together. And we need to live in this beautiful home for many, many centuries in the future together. So let's not destroy this home. Let's stop wars and let's embrace each other. No matter of color of skin, no matter of religious beliefs, we all same way brothers and sisters here. So that's how I see Francesco. And I do believe that it's a call for action.
Well, Evgeny, thank you very much. I just want to also echo something that Suzanne said at the beginning, that I was very emotionally moved when I was watching this. So thank you for making such a powerful vehicle. I'd like to thank all of you for being such an informative and articulate panel. And I hope that, as Evgeny says, this discussion leads to re-energized attention and engagement. And as Suzanne said, effective action, not just words, effective action to help address these three crises that we've been talking about in particular. And I'd like to thank Discovery for hosting this. Thank you, all of you.